5 minutes, I'm gonna run to the bathroom.
Okay. Well, you've got about 8, so.
Oh, okay.
When you going back? Some people
Good morning, happy Tuesday, and welcome to Connection. We will begin with our devotion. It's not the first day of December yesterday, but this is the first Tuesday we have had devotion in December, and our new theme for the month is Pursuing Peace. And today's title is The Peace, P-E-A-C-E of God, and Your Peace, P-I-E-C-E of God. But first, let's say our prayer of surrender together. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me. And the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it. I perceive it. And now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is. So the affirmation is, the peace of God is bigger than my peace of God, as the peace of God surpasses all understanding and surpasses my specific understanding. I will not allow my peace of God to keep the peace of God from becoming a reality among the global human family. I will let there be peace on earth. I will let it begin with me. And I will consciously create peace by not allowing my peace, P-I-E-C-E, to prevent peace, P-E-A-C-E. That's a little bit different when you're just listening to it rather than reading it because of the different spellings. So it says, the ego is to be blamed for so much of the separation, disunity, and violence that has existed between different religions and human beings for as long as there has been recordable human history. One religion's peace of God perpetually gets in the way of the peace of God. From the three Hebrew children being forced to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's God, to Jewish Pharisees sending Jesus to the cross over religious differences, to the Christians crusading and forcing Muslims to convert to Christianity, our history as a species is replete with one religion's peace of God preventing peace between all of God's children. Somehow, the universe keeps presenting us with the opportunity to learn this same lesson, the lesson of tolerance and coexistence, over and over. Yet, we keep refusing the learning. Time and time again, millennia after millennia, war after war, we continue to resist the lesson and insist that our specific peace of God is really the answer to finally experiencing the peace of God. Once everyone believes exactly like us, uses our name for God, reads our specific holy book, worships like us, there will be peace on earth. Question mark? Really? Hold your peace, P-I-E-C-E, of God close to your heart, and never forget the spiritual tradition that introduced you to the creator of the universe. Yet, allow all of God's children that same right. Perhaps when all the pieces of God can agree to this golden rule, we will finally have the peace, P-E-A-C-E, of God. All right, our ending prayer. God of all, as your child, I give thanks for my peace of you. Today, my peace won't prevent peace between all of your children. Amen. All right, so this devotion today spoke about pieces of things. Pieces, again, P-I-E-C-E-S, as opposed to peace, P-E-A-C-E. And that's appropriate because we're going to talk today about what happens when we allow ourselves to splinter into different pieces rather than identifying that part of us that is always whole. All right, but before we get into that, let's repeat our connection affirmation together. I allow perfect health in my body, perfect peace in my mind, perfect unconditional love in my heart, and the perfect divine timing of spirit to guide my life in thought, word, and deed. Amen. So, as I told you last week, I saw something on Instagram that sparked some thoughts in me, but I needed a little more time to fully develop them, which I found this week. So, I'll just begin with that Instagram post in lieu of any quotes. For those of you who are on Instagram, sometimes, people will put up a post in a series of several slides that you have to swipe through. And that's what this one was. So it's a little lengthy. When reading it, it was broken up into sections, but I'm going to read it all together to you. The first slide was the title, and it is this: What the Church Never Told You About Satan and Demons. The greatest lie ever told was convincing you the enemy was outside of you. You were taught that Satan, and the author put it in quotation marks, is a cosmic villain, a fallen angel, God's enemy, that force stalking your soul. But that's not what the original languages say. In Hebrew, Satan never meant devil. It meant the adversary, the thing that opposes your alignment, your obstacle, your resistance. A function, not a creature. In Greek, Satanas preserved the same meaning: the opposer, the inner resistance, the force that stands between you and your highest self. Not a monster, a mirror. Now, demons. In Greek, daimonion meant shattered parts of the psyche. Chaotic inner drives, emotional disturbances. Ancient mystics saw demons as disordered soul fragments, not evil entities plotting ruin. Okay, time out. I'm not going to stop too much in the middle of this because I'm saving most of my commentary for later. But I do want to stop right here after that particular statement and say that we use the word demons like this all the time. We talk about ourselves or someone else dealing with our or their demons, and we're usually talking about something like alcoholism or drug addiction or some other abusive, out of control behavior. We refer to those as our demons or their demons. They're dealing with their demons, or we have dealt with our demons. So we do understand the use of it in that context. We're not always talking about external entities that we feel can possess people without their consent. We use that word like the ancients use it in modern language. So we share that with these ancient mystics. And I think the wording here is so descriptive that demons are disordered soul fragments, because that is what causes all of this abusive, out of control behavior. Okay, continuing on. This doesn't deny that dark energies exist. People experience them. People perceive them. The unseen is real. But the metaphysical view reveals another layer. Most demons are fractured identities of the ego, splinters of a mind in survival mode. Scripture even hints at this when the man says, "My name is Legion," in Luke 8:30. All right, so if you don't know that Bible story, Jesus happens upon a man. The Bible story is called the man in the tombs or cemetery of Gadara. He lived in a graveyard. He was like a crazy man. Everybody stayed away from him because they thought they referred to him as demon possessed. And when Jesus encountered him, he said, "What is your name?" And he said, "My name is Legion." Well, what is a legion? It says a legion is 6,000 soldiers. So what this is saying is even the scriptures points to the fact that demons are just fractured parts of the same person. His name was Legion. He was not whole. He had 6,000 different parts of himself that he could not control. All right. Yeshua, or Jesus, wasn't addressing a creature. He was addressing a mind split into 1,000 fragmented selves. I love that. I love that description of it. Religion conditioned us to externalize the enemy. So now we see enemies everywhere. But fear makes us project. Okay, now let's remind ourselves what projection means. It means we take something that's inside of us that we haven't dealt with or we have chosen not to deal with or see, and we put it on somebody else or out there. Well, that's what we've done with the devil. All of that disorder and chaos that we feel inside, we want to blame a creature outside of us for it rather than deal with it on the inside. It continues, dogma makes us create villains. Separation makes us see the darkness outside instead of the darkness inside of us. And yet, Jesus said, love your enemies. Why would he say that if the enemy was a cosmic monster? Unless the enemy he spoke of was never external, unless he was pointing to the shadow within you. So here's the truth bomb. What if the real Satan, the real adversary, is the inner voice that fractures you? The part of your mind that tells you you're not enough. You can't do this. You're unworthy. No one will love you. The real battle is not outside. It is within your consciousness. When you stop fighting your shadow, when you integrate the fragments, when you return to wholeness, the adversary dissolves. The obstacle is removed. Satan was never a figure to fear. It was an invitation to heal. Whoo! Okay, so that was the Instagram post that I read. That was a lot, and that was deep. So let's get into it. I'm going to go back now to the devotion that we read last Tuesday, because if you remember, I said it was going to be a really good introduction for this teaching to what we'll be talking about today. And today's fit somewhat, but this one fits a little bit better, the one that we read last week. I think I have it marked in here. Let me do it with one hand. Here it is. It was called Remember Who You Are. It says, when dropping kids off at school or at a friend's house, it's common for parents to say something like, remember who you are, which is shorthand for behave yourself and don't forget everything we've taught you here at home when you walk out that door into a different environment. I can imagine God saying that to us as we are leaving the realm of spirit, our home, to be born into the very different environment of our life here on earth. Remembering who we are involves knowing who we are to begin with, which is more difficult than it sounds. Very early in our lives, we are told that our name, our family, our life story, our job, our race, our religion, our gender are all expressions of the I we are supposed to be. Okay, what does that sound like? What the post was saying, all these different fragments of ourselves, not the whole. But those are all nothing but labels. And labels are nothing more than a brief experience within a tiny band of frequency in the universe that we call the world. The more you subdivide the sense of I with these labels, the further away you move from the greater, eternal, infinite I that you were when you were born. Thus, why God says, remember who you are when you go down into this world where it is possible for you to be split up into different fragments. It's not possible in the spirit realm. Your eternal self is never fractured. But when you come down here, it's possible. So remember who you are, that you are whole. The all that ever was, is, and ever can be. Each of us is just a unique point of attention of that I. The more we self-identify with labels, the smaller we become. The more we are able to drop our labels, the more we can simply say, I am that I am, because that is who we truly are. All right, so you see how it's all fitting together. This was talking about the fact that we are all individual pieces and expressions of the I am. And when we recognize that and walk in that, when we operate from that knowing, we are whole. Okay, it's kind of a paradox, realizing that we are a smaller part or piece of the bigger all is what makes us whole, all right? It's what brings all of our individual and fragmented pieces together. I'm going to go on now to read different angles or views, explanations, and expansions, if you will, of this same premise and theme from several different people. I'm not really sure who this first one came from. I copied it from an earlier teaching. Here's what it says, though. Humanity is by far its own worst enemy. Okay, so time out. Remember what we were talking about earlier. The enemy is not some external boogeyman. The enemy is quite literally us, okay, in both the collective and the individual sense. Here, this person is talking about humanity as a collective. Continuing. In 1673, a man named Samuel von Pufendorf, what if your last name was von Pufendorf? I'm sorry, I'm being a child. He wrote this statement: more inhumanity has been done by man himself than any other of nature's causes, which was later shortened to the phrase man's inhumanity to man by the poet Robert Burns. And although sad, he goes on, it's nonetheless true that man himself has done much more to damage mankind than any virus or plague or natural disaster ever has. When we talk about the concept of fighting an enemy, we would do well to remember that enemy number one of mankind is mankind itself. So in essence, all we ever truly fight when we make the choice to fight is ourselves, end quote. All right, so let's go back to part of our opening statement in light of what we just read. The real battle is not outside. It is within your consciousness. When you stop fighting your shadow, when you integrate the fragments, when you return to wholeness, the adversary dissolves, the obstacle is removed. So the piece we just read was talking about on the collective level. Mankind as a whole does and has done more damage to itself than any outside force. And so it is on the individual level. That voice inside us that causes us to identify with the wrong part of ourselves, that fragments us into pieces by encouraging us to put labels on ourselves, that makes us so much smaller than who we really are. That's the real enemy. That's the biggest enemy, not anybody else out here saying anything to you or doing anything to you. So now let's read something from a man named David Icke. He says, who are we? Let's start with who we're told we are. We are told we are our name, our family, our life story, our job, our income, our religion, our race, our sexuality. These are all expressions of the I we are supposed to accept. Okay, but all they really are, as we said in the devotion, is labels. And actually, these labels are nothing more than a brief, this is repeating the devotion now, nothing more than a brief experience within a tiny band of frequency that we know as and we call the world. So these are the versions of self-identity that dictate our sense of the I from the cradle to the grave and do little more than divide and separate us from each other as well as from our true eternal self. The more you subdivide your sense of the I, the more you are withdrawing from the greater eternal infinite I. In reality, there is only one I, the all that ever was, is, and ever can be. And each of us is a unique point of attention of that infinite I, that infinite unity and oneness. All right. So that was a lot of repeating of the devotion. Actually, I probably got that from David Icke. The more we self-identify with a label, the smaller we become. And I would add, the more fragmented we become, the more pieces of ourselves we break off into, destroying or taking away from our wholeness. So why do we need labels, he asks? Why can we not just be who and what we are? When we cannot do this, and when we must identify with one or more labels, we create a phantom self, which is only an illusion. All right. Or, as our opening piece described it, it is what stands between us and our higher self. This phantom self we have created through all of this fragmentation through our inner voice is the obstacle to us being our higher self. That is our adversary. That is our Satan. It is us, not some devil. Next, he talks about what he calls the religion of I am. Now, at first, that sounds good. Who wouldn't want to have the religion of I am? But it's not good in the way he explains it. Listen to this. The greatest religion people follow today, what they worship, is whatever label they choose to fill in the blank that comes after the words I am. So what he's saying is, we don't stop at I am that I am. We say I am and then we fill in the blank. Take your pick from the many labels there are. I am a man. I am a woman. I am a Christian. I am an American. I am a Republican. I am a feminist. I am a heterosexual. I am a lesbian. Each label subdivides and separates you more and more from both your true infinite eternal self as well as from others. He says we have identified with our labels so much that we have become them. They identify us completely. But this is not our true self, only what he calls our phantom self. So that's the self that becomes or gives birth to our demon or demons, okay, plural, as we talked about a few minutes ago. Our abusive, out of control behaviors that come to define us if we do not get them under control. So speaking of that, before we move on, I want to talk about that for just a minute. How do we get those things under control? Here's a hint. It's not how we usually try to do it. So let's get some insight about that from Dr. Kim Duramo. She says, you're never going to be able to manage this because you are creating a war. So I kind of skipped over the first part of what she was talking about. We're coming in the middle, but I think you're going to be able to get it from the context. She's talking about when you're trying to fight anything. When you're trying, she says, but if you decide to let go, you may notice at first that there's fear and pain, discomfort, or grief. Okay, acknowledge that that's all there. Don't fight it. Breathe in, breathe out, and see what's there. More grief. More fear. Okay, breathe in, breathe out. Just keep doing that until all you feel is the present moment and yourself being present in it. So this is her strategy for putting the pieces of yourself that have been fragmented back together. She goes on, the thing that allows these energies to dissolve is presence, not trying to get rid of them. Remember what we said? Jesus said, love your enemies. Love those pieces of you that have been shattered. Don't fight them. Love them. What is it that Amanda Ellis always says? You can never fight anything right. You can only love it right. The process we're all meant to go through here on earth is that of mastery, not management. When I try to manage or manhandle what is, I'm constantly trying to either make it better or make it go away. When I'm mastering something, I receive the situation or the circumstance as it is, as a gift from the divine to help me along with the process of mastery. I say yes to the present moment as it is because I realize I'm in a conversation with divinity, not a battle with this thing I think of as bad. So you see how she switched that up? She says all these things are causing us to be in a conversation with this way, with the divine, not out here fighting each little piece. All right. When you view your life as a conversation with divinity, you see every experience as being to your benefit. And when you see it this way, everything that comes to you to strengthen you stays with you. And that which does not strengthen you moves through without resistance. So what could there possibly be for you to defend against? What could there possibly be for you to fight? When you truly find your inner peace, okay, here it is, of course, P-E-A-C-E, but I'm going to go back to our devotion and say, when you find and gather back together all the pieces, P-I-E-C-E-S, of yourself that you have allowed to splinter off via these labels you've identified with, when all of that comes back together in your I amness, then you become aware that everything, she says, is just a reflection of your consciousness. And the only purpose it could possibly serve is to assist you in coming into a greater peace, P-E-A-C-E. It's interesting that she used the word reflection there. What did our earlier piece say about what Satan actually is? Not a monster, but a mirror. Okay? It just holds up to you what you are, what you have allowed yourself to become. It also spoke about it being your own inner resistance. And what does she say here? Everything that doesn't strengthen you, everything that doesn't serve you, or that is standing in the way of you identifying with and becoming your higher self, moves through you without resistance, without the devil. Okay? When you've let that go, you decide to start remembering or remembering. Remember, we know we say that before. You take all of the members out there and remember them back together. Okay, lovely, just lovely. So now we're going to spend the rest of the teaching talking about identifying with and connecting with our own divinity, because that's what seems to be the key to destroying, for lack of a better word, the devil and everything that we've come to understand that means. Not a red creature with a pitchfork and horns and a long tail, but our own inner fragmentation that and how we put ourselves back together by remembering in both senses, remembering, recalling, and remembering, actually putting back together our divinity, which is who we truly are, remembering who we are. We sing a song sometimes around here at church that I love because its lyrics directly reflect what I've just been talking about, recognizing our own divinity. Here are some of the lyrics. Fear is not my future, you are. Sickness is not my story, you are. Heartbreak is not my home, you are. Death is not the end, you are. Now, what are all those things? Fear, sickness, heartbreak, death. Those are the fragments. Those are when we get fragmented. And later on, they change it up and sing it like this. Fear is not your future, you are. So changing it from that, it's going from you are, God up there, to you are, the God in here. A step further with the same meaning would be to sing it like this, to personalize it. Fear is not my future, I am. Sickness is not my story, I am, etc. Because when you discover your own divinity, everything changes, and you do indeed see a new horizon, which is the next part of the song. It says, hello peace, hello joy, hello love, hello strength, hello hope. It's a new horizon. When you realize the power of your own I am without having to put any qualifier behind it, like David Icke was talking about earlier, then you can really welcome in all these things: peace, joy, love, strength, hope, and without any obstacles, without a Satan in the way. Jesus was a model for us in that he died physically and then rose again victoriously, conquering death itself. But one of the ways we will do greater things even than he did, you remember he even told us that. He said, greater things than I do, you will do even greater things than I do. Okay, so one of the ways I think that we will do greater things is that we will die symbolically while we're still alive. Two things like our ego, the part of us that causes us to splinter off into separate pieces, to our belief in human limitations, and not to feel like we have to wait until we're in spirit form, until after we die, to know our own divine power. So symbolically, what we die to is our old way of looking at ourselves. We die to the lie we were told that we were born in sin and shaped in iniquity. We die to the idea that we are wretches. We die to our sin consciousness and are resurrected into our Christ consciousness. Okay, so this resurrection power that is even greater than Jesus's physical resurrection is us recognizing our I amness and being resurrected into our divinity while we are still in our physical bodies. See, he did it. He physically died and came back. We're going to do it all while we're still alive. And I'm going to add here for our purposes today, we die to the idea of who we've been told Satan is. So speaking of this symbolic death we must go through before we can be resurrected, I want to read a piece now by Amanda Ellis about the process of death and rebirth and how beautiful it can be. Sometimes she says, sometimes when we look at ourselves in the mirror and take stock of all that's happened to us, everything we've been through, we feel like the damage that's been done to us is just too great to be repaired. There are just too many fragments to remember back together. We think we're too far gone. Other people might be able to experience a rebirth, but it's too late for us. The fire in our lives has just been too devastating. So time out. When she wrote this piece, it was back a few years ago when there were wildfires going all through Australia specifically. And this is what she was talking about, but she was making a comparison to that those people, she said she's sure at the time that those people who saw all that devastation thought this land will never return to what it once was. And she was making a comparison that sometimes we look in the mirror and say, we'll never be what we once, we can never get back all the pieces of ourselves we have lost or that have been damaged. She says, consider a single piece of coal glowing in your family's stove. That chunk of coal was once a green plant, a fern or a reed that lived perhaps 1 million or maybe even 100 million years ago. But then the plant died and fell, probably into water somewhere, and decayed into peat. And the peat was folded inside the earth for years upon years, eons, in which something like a month or a decade or even a whole lifetime is just a puff of air or a snap of two fingers. And eventually that peat dried and became like stone, and someone dug it up and the coal man brought it to your house. Okay, so obviously she lives in the United Kingdom. Obviously this is still a thing that happens there. Coal men still bring coal to people's houses, I guess. And maybe you yourself carried it to the stove, and now that sunlight that is 100 million years old heats your home tonight. So even when the plant that eventually becomes the coal dies, we must remember that death is an illusion. Nothing ever truly dies. It just transforms. Everything recycles. Everything rejuvenates. So what I took from this was, don't let that inner voice, that piece on Satan was talking about, the broken, all those broken pieces of yourself, don't believe that they cannot be put back together again. And what sometimes feels like death is just you transforming into something new. It's just the pieces coming back together into wholeness. Sometimes if we look at our story through that fragmented lens, it seems hopeless. But as Amanda put it here, the fire and the destruction it causes, the death that it brings is not the end of the story, okay? Let's go back to the song lyrics. Death is not the end. So speaking of our story, let's shift gears just a little now and talk about exactly how we integrate or reintegrate ourselves, put the splintered pieces of our psyche back together. Our story, our history is only useful until we have learned whatever lesson it has come to teach us. But then we must integrate that lesson into our greater personality. Because when we do that, little by little, our personality, which is our small self, grows into our higher or eternal self. And everything that is not our divine nature then just gets stripped away, giving our human personality the opportunity to merge with our creator self, which is exactly what happened, if we think about it, to Jesus of Nazareth. He became the Christ as he allowed the lessons he learned on a human level to be integrated into the totality of who he was and to strip away everything that was not his original divine nature. He remembered who he was. That's important. We'll come back to that point in just a few moments. But right now, we're going to move on to a piece by Andrew Martin. He says, if you have truly integrated the lessons from your past, you don't need to remember it in order to remind yourself. All right, so every time he's not talking, okay, we just talked about remember in one way, but what he's talking about, it really is to relive something. Okay, he says every time you relive a traumatic experience, you rewire your mind to lock it in. Okay, you identify with that person you were when it happened and the damage it caused to you. Integration, though, ensures that the lesson has become part of you, not the trauma, the lesson. All right, so there's a differentiation between reliving something and integrating the lesson of it. Because when you just relive the whole experience, you just stay in your trauma. But when you integrate it, you're taking what you learned from it and you're leaving the rest. Okay, so I want to just make that distinction. Back to Andrew. In other words, once the story has done its job, it's okay to drop it and move on. Or said in another way, to bring it back into the wholeness of who you are, rather than thinking of it, whatever it was, as an isolated, separate experience. This thing that happened to me. This next part is puts a little different spin on the term, like I just said, that we've been using today, remembering. So there's always two sides to the coin. So now we're going to talk about the other side of remembering. You can remember in a negative way. He says, continuing to remember or keep its members, the parts of it alive, does exactly that. It keeps it alive. You get to choose what you keep alive. You can choose to keep your trauma alive. In order to move past it, you have to integrate the lesson and then drop the story itself. All right. So have you ever heard about how we always hear, there's a big story everybody uses of how the caterpillar becomes the butterfly. But what we don't know is when that caterpillar goes into the cocoon, we just think maybe, okay, it grows wings and da-da. No. Do you know what really happens when its body secretes an acid-like substance that completely dissolves it, and it starts from scratch making the new it's not just, we add a little wing here and it's the same basic thing. No, it totally takes it down to nothing and then builds it back up again. So transformation, sometimes, again, it's like death, okay? All right. Once more back to Andrew. Your history doesn't tell you who you are. Your history tells you who you have been. History can never define your timeless, eternal self. If remembering history worked, we wouldn't keep repeating the same old mistakes. If you are using history to create as a model for the future, then you are only creating from the mind, or as we've talked about today, the ego, the fragmented parts of yourself, where you're still spinning around in your trauma. The best the mind can offer is a rerun. The minute we go into the mind, it becomes rooted in the past, in our story, because that's all the mind has access to, the separate, splintered parts. Also, believing you need to keep the bad stories alive in your consciousness in order to keep yourself safe is a trick of the mind. Okay, it's that inner voice of resistance that keeps you from moving forward into the best version of yourself. The true self, the expanded self, the eternal infinite creator self, the I am, doesn't need history to do what it came here to do. Source is always seeking expansion through new experience. History is the opposite of this. What is valuable is the wisdom we gain from the experiences in our history. But they've got to be integrated in order to do us any good. And when we allow this to happen, when the wisdom from the lesson of our past comes in, it elbows out the story of the past that was just a placeholder. And that's when real growth occurs. We no longer need to keep remembering the story once the end result, the product, has been fully integrated into our emotional self. So that was Andrew Martin. That is the flip side of this process of remembering. If we remember or keep holding on to the broken pieces by reliving the trauma, by continuing to identify as the victim of the experiences we've had, rather than extract the wisdom of those experiences that has brought us and reintegrating that back into what we view as our whole self, then we'll remain broken and splintered. And we will become our own devil. We get in our own way. We block our own growth and healing. But if we let go, as Dr. Kim was saying, if we learn to master rather than manage, then we move, as I'm about to read, from victim to co-creator. So here's a piece with that very title by our friend Greg Braden that I will end with today. He says, right now, we are all being pushed to the very edge of the way we define ourselves, and our resilience is being tested. When I was a kid growing up in the 1950s, resilience meant something very different to me than it does today. In those days, resilience meant that if you had a bad day, you just needed to suck it up and get over it. But we've come a long way in our understanding since then. Now we know about something called adaptive resilience, and here's how it's different from the old definition. The old way of thinking about resilience was that you were kind of chugging along through life, and when something unexpected happened, it threw you for a loop, and then you'd have to do whatever it took to get back on track, as it were. Adaptive resilience, however, means your radar is always on. You're always surveying your environment and realizing you don't live in the same world you have known in the past. Okay, what was Andrew Martin just saying? Don't keep remembering your old story, okay? Don't keep reliving your past hurts. So you consciously make incremental shifts in 5 different areas of your life in order to be more resilient during the unexpected shifts in this human experience. Those 5 areas or domains are physiological, your physical body, psychological, emotional, mental, and spiritual. To truly be the best version of ourselves, we must become resilient in all 5. But I want to focus now on being spiritually resilient. Spiritual resilience begins with the way we think of ourselves in relation to the world around us, in relation to other people, to our own bodies, to the cosmos, to whatever higher power we believe in, to time, our past and our future. How we look at all of that is a part of our spiritual resilience. And what our spiritual resilience depends on is the level to which we recognize our own divinity. Now, for some people, that word means religion, and I can see why it would, because there are schools of divinity teaching religious traditions. But if you actually look up the definition of divinity, all it means is the ability to transcend perceived limitations. And that's it. Now let's think about this. First, it's the ability to transcend. So we're not fighting against anything. All right, so back to Dr. Kim. We're not down here fighting this way. We're having a conversation with divinity. Thus, we are mastering, okay? So he's about to say what she said in different words. We're becoming more than whatever conditions we're being faced with. Okay, that's what mastery means. Second, it says perceived limitations. We place limitations upon ourselves many times that don't actually exist, but we perceive that they're real through our programming and our filters and our conditioning from childhood. But divinity is our ability to be the best version of ourselves and to create the best possible world and reality for ourselves. Here's an example. When a musician creates an amazing piece of music or an artist paints a magnificent portrait, to a person of the artists I've come across and asked the question, where did it come from? They have all answered, it didn't come from me, it came through me. What are they saying? It came from that part of them that is divine. Our divinity is timeless, it's ageless, it is not contained within our bodies, yet we cannot be separated from it. This is where our deep intuition and direct knowing come from. And these are the parts of us that help us navigate the world in a healthy way. As I said, we cannot be separated from this part of us, our divinity, but we can deny it. Why? Because we have free will. And I see people do this all the time. They believe that they are powerless victims of the world outside of them and of the events happening around them. They see the world and all that is in it as their adversary. Okay, so there's that word again. They see everything out. They see the devil as outside of them, attacking them. They go through life blaming everyone and everything else but themselves for what's going on in their lives that's bad. All right, so how do we know if we have become one of these people? How do we know when our spiritual resilience is being tested? He says, here's a litmus test. When you are inundated with information, whether it's from social media, the news, or some other source, and it triggers inside of you a feeling or a response that betrays your truest nature, when you become something you are not in the presence of information that has been presented to you, that is a very clear sign that you are giving the power of your divinity away to someone or something else. So you know how people will say, I don't know why I did that. That wasn't who I am. That wasn't me. Well, because it wasn't. That was not your true self. That's because you've given your power away. When we allow ourselves to be divided as families, as communities, as societies, and nations as the result of disinformation and misinformation, that's one of the ways we deny our divinity. Now, time out. He's talking right here about being divided in the collective and as a collective. But let's bring it down into the individual. Okay, when we allow ourselves to be divided in all the ways that we've talked about today, splintered, when we allow ourselves to be fragmented. He says, every moment of every day we choose to either affirm or deny our divinity through the way we think, through the way we address one another, the way we allow others to address us, the way we nourish our bodies, and the information we take in. Making sure each of these is the highest and best that is possible is how we become spiritually resilient. All right, so always striving for the highest and best that is possible in every moment, and knowing in the deepest part of ourselves that we are divine, and when we identify with and as that, that's when we become whole, okay? All of the splintered pieces come back together. And I will repeat part of that piece I began with today. What if the real Satan, the real adversary, is the inner voice that fractures you? The part of your mind that tells you you're not enough, you can't do this, you're unworthy, no one will love you, And I'm going to add, you're not divine. The real battle is not outside. It is within your consciousness. When you stop fighting your shadow, when you integrate the fragments, when you return to wholeness, to your divinity, when you remember who you are, the adversary dissolves. The obstacle is removed. Satan was never a figure to fear. It was and is an invitation to heal. Amen? Amen. Let's stand together, and Miss Diana is going to help me sing our ending song.
Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say Amen. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say Amen.
Be at peace. Have a great week. I love you.